behind me is the incredible museum here at Pegasus Bridge, dedicated to the history of the 6th Airborne and the events that took place in and around Bénouville and Ronville and the whole 6th British Airborne area from D-Day and the days following. And in this episode of World War II Wayfinder, I'm going to take you on a guided tour of the museum, pointing out some of my favourite parts of it, and I hope you enjoy. So welcome inside the museum here, and as you can see, this place is crammed full of exhibits, full of authentic wartime equipment, and it details the story of the area and then the involvement of the British Airborne here. So here we've got equipment used by the German occupation forces, an MG42 there, the most prominent machine gun in that cabinet. A great display here of the British 37 pattern webbing that would have been commonplace amongst the gliders men of Major Howard's Ox and Bucks Light Infantry. And if you're not familiar with British equipment, that's the entrenching tool there. It could also be used in close combat with the No. 4 spike bayonet attached to the end of it. And here is a great display comparing what the men wore 80 years ago with the Denison smock and the X-type harness, as well as the infamous leg bag that gets such a bad rap, to the modern British airborne soldier of the 21st century. For anybody that has seen the film The Longest Day and the Rupert dummy paratroopers that were dropped as part of Operation Titanic by the Special Air Service, this is what they actually look like, not the plastic paratroop lookalike dummy that we see in the film, but they were actually just really sacks of cloth cut to look like human figures with weights in them so that they would descend under canopy when dropped from C-47 Dakotas. Now, an interesting feature of these vests worn by British forces was that they could also be used, if captured, to then form an escape rope by unravelling them. So they were multi-purpose and a fantastic piece of ingenuity by the British forces that developed them. Now, without a doubt, my favourite exhibit here inside of the museum is in this cabinet here, and these are artefacts that belonged to Major John Howard of D Company, the Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry, the senior officer who was put in charge of the capture of Pegasus and Horsa Bridges here on D-Day. And there is the famous maroon beret that was worn by Major John Howard, and you can see there it's got the rifle green backing and then the cap badge of the Light Infantry, and here Major Howard's airborne helmet. And a couple of interesting features about this: you can see the unit markings of the Ox and Bucks Light Infantry there on the side, the unit flash. But then here is the hole made by a German sniper on the 7th of June when they were surrounded at Escoville. Now, fortunately, the bullet only grazed Howard's head, but you can see there as well the exit hole there. So fortunately, the sniper was just an average shot. Now, not only does the museum remember the actions of the Ox and Bucks, but also that of the men of the Glider Pilot Regiment that landed here and then fought here alongside the men of the Ox and Bucks Light Infantry for the duration of the time that they were here. So when you look at the photos here of just how badly broken up the Horsa gliders were upon landing, it is of real importance to credit the men of the Glider Pilot Regiment and their role in this operation, because without them and their incredible flying skills and courage, it just wouldn't have been possible. Here's a fantastic exhibit looking at the Horsa glider. So at the rear there you've got the loading chart that would be used to understand how much weight could be held in the different positions. And then this centre of gravity balance. And this is fantastic to see this original kit relating to the Horsa glider, as it is such an iconic part of World War II, especially of the British Airborne part in the Second World War, and to see it represented here is fantastic. So behind me there is an Airborne Jeep, and it just goes to show how versatile the design of the wartime Jeep was, that it could be converted in so many different ways to fulfill whatever purpose was needed at the time during the Second World War. Now, typical features with the Airborne Jeep was a cut down bumper. This was to help it load into the Horsa glider. And then sometimes as well you would see a spare wheel for it going on the front there, but there we've got an Airborne folding bicycle instead. And then different racks on the bonnet there, or the hood if you're American, to load down whatever equipment. You'd also see it with the cloverleaf tubes for different ammunition, and then the distinctive Mickey Mouse camouflage. It was as it was known because it looked a lot like the ears on Mickey Mouse. And just fantastic to see it here and on the original loading ramps there that would have been used to gain access to and from the gliders. Other cracking exhibits here is a little well bike, and again this was a wonderful piece of airborne equipment. It could be folded up, fairly man portable, and then used to move between positions, battalions and companies, and again just to speed up that relaying of messages if radios didn't work, or to travel quickly between positions, not necessarily in the front lines but certainly in those areas secured by the British Airborne, and just wonderful to see. And there you can see it in use in that original photo being assembled after it's been pulled out of the drop canister. And there the Vickers machine gun and the Bren machine gun. Now the Vickers first saw service in the First World War and then went on to do sterling work in the Second World War, and the Bren gun being an amalgamation of Bruno from the Czech Republic and Enfield in the United Kingdom, and then served with the British Army and the British forces for a number of years, even into the 90s in various configurations. Now this is another fantastic display here. It shows not only the Horsa glider, but the lesser known but equally as valuable Hamilcar glider, and this was capable of carrying much bigger vehicles, such as we see there, a Bren gun carrier and an anti-tank gun coming out from behind it. But they were also responsible for delivering the Tetrarch tank into battle here in D-Day. Now, for anybody familiar with the story here and the relief by the commandos on D-Day at Pegasus Bridge, you will recognise these. These are the bagpipes from Piper Bill Millen, who was part of Lord Lovat's commando unit that relieved the airborne forces here at Pegasus Bridge on D-Day. Again, another incredible artefact of this part of the D-Day story to see preserved. Now this is the uniform and equipment of a British paratrooper of the 6th Airborne that fought here in Normandy. Now one interesting point to note is, unlike the difference between the US Airborne paratroopers and glider infantry, British Airborne paratroopers and air landing troops, or glider troops, had exactly the same uniforms and equipment, bar the trousers parachutists, which had a couple of additional features such as a big leg pocket on the left thigh and then 2 pockets for first field dressings to be worn on the rear of the trousers. Behind me is a 17-pounder anti-tank gun as used by British and Commonwealth forces during the war, and this really was a devastating piece of equipment. This is when the 17-pounder was fitted to the Sherman. It was then known as the Sherman Firefly, and the 17-pounder was able to go toe-to-toe with the 88mm found on the German Tiger 1s and Tiger 2s. And looking at it, you can see why. It's a really formidable piece of kit. Now, another excellent feature here at the Pegasus Memorial Museum is that of a 1:1 scale replica Horsa glider here that's at the back of the outside part of the museum. And if you visit here, this again is a must-see because it will give you an idea of the scale of the Horsa glider, just how big these aircraft were, because they had to be to deliver the men into combat along with the vehicles that they were capable of carrying. But to think that they were unarmoured, unpowered, and to think they were flown into battle with the minimal amount of training that the wartime situation allowed for, just shows the courage, the skill, and the fortitude of the men of the Glider Pilot Regiment of the British Army. Now, behind me is one of those pieces of equipment from the Second World War. It's not particularly sexy, it didn't really do any fighting, but it was vitally important to the Allies at the operational level to allow the movement of men and materiel across the thousands of waterways that the advancing Allied armies would encounter from D-Day right the way through to the 8th of May 1945. And it is, of course, the Bailey Bridge. Now, these bridges were exceptional, and this one is one of the original ones that crossed one of the waterways here. It was in place until the 50s, then dismantled and then donated to the museum in the early 2000s. And to see it here, knowing that it's a wartime veteran of the events that took place here, is exceptional, and I think it's a real credit to the museum that they've got it here. Now, a trip to this museum wouldn't be complete without stepping foot on the original Pegasus Bridge that was captured by Major Howard's men on the morning of the 6th of June 1944. And here it is. Here is the original wartime Pegasus Bridge. And incredible to think that it's still here, still being preserved and cared for by the wonderful museum here. And this really is an absolute must. If you're coming to visit Normandy, to see the D-Day beaches, to see those areas involved in the landings, regardless of your nationality, this is very much a must-see. And one interesting thing, you've still got here the original spang marks from the bullets as part of the action that took place here from the 6th of June onwards. And the bridge still bears those scars to this day. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of World War II Wayfinder, looking at the Memorial Museum here to Pegasus Bridge and the men of Major Howard's 2nd Battalion D Company, Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Light Infantry, as well as the rest of the British 6th Airborne Division that landed in and around this area on the 6th of June 1944. If you have enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Okay, thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.